Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to a special UCF Rewind edition of the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez here with you as we go through some of the great games and great moments in UCF football history. You guys probably remember, of course, we did a War on I-4 rewatch back on April the 13th, and we have a very special guest on this show who we dedicated the entire show to him, and credit to you, Eric Lopez, for getting him on the show. One of our truly favorite people in the play-by-play business and in announcing in general. Adam Amin, Eric Lopez, join us. You were the one who spoke to him. Yep. What a joy to talk to him, isn't it?
Oh, it was a blast. It was great to catch up with him. And, as you'll hear in the interview I had with him, it was right around this time a year ago, we were hanging out at the Amway Center for the Magic and the Raptors playoff game. And so we were kind of reminiscing about that a little bit on the air and off the air because, as you know, he is as busy as it comes when it comes to broadcasters. He can literally do just about every sport and has.
He's everywhere.
For the most part. I mean, he's called volleyball. He's obviously calls Major League Baseball. He's called, obviously the Women's College World Series and softball.
Women's Final Four.
Women's Final Four, which we get into in this interview later, and how the 2018 Women's Final Four actually has a very significant moment there for him personally, as we'll get into that later in the interview. But he's called obviously that. He's called the NBA. For ESPN Radio and on ESPN TV. Of course, he had some memorable calls, the LeBron James buzzer beater against Toronto in 2018. But, he's also called the NFL on the radio and college football. He's been calling college football on ESPN. He's been on ESPN since 2011. And when you think of some of the signature games in his broadcasting career, as we'll talk about during the interview, it's this game. This is a game that's very signature game to him. And, I think you guys even commented on the rewatch, and we discussed this in depth in the interview. The broadcast of this game from him and the crew there with, obviously Dusty Dvorak was his analyst and Molly McGrath on the sideline, I thought added to the drama of this football game, which turned out to be arguably the game of the year of the regular season in 2017 in college football. And you could make the case, Jeff, maybe the greatest UCF sporting event. Greatest game played on campus in any sport in the history of UCF athletics.
I think it has to be, and folks who follow you and I both know like how much we nerd out about television and television coverage of sports and play-by-play as an industry and as a craft, right? And Adam has very quickly become one of the best, and we all were exposed to that in very fine fashion, that Black Friday evening back in 2017, because it's very rare that, when we think about memories of certain sports moments, the calls are the soundtrack to that. We will always hear those moments as we see them. And with Adam and his crew, like we said, theirs was the soundtrack to just the most phenomenal night, I think, in UCF sports history, and that we'll be able to take with us wherever we go. Every time we will hear Adam Amin's voice, until the day we die, right? Calling this moment, And that gives you, and so you hope that it's really good, that they did a really good job, and they just did a phenomenal job. They knocked it out of the park that particular evening. So I will let you, without further ado, I will get out of the way and let you do the honors.
Well, here it is. He, of course, as I mentioned, has been an ESPN broadcaster since 2011. Of course, a Valpo grad. He's called all the sporting events we've talked about, and including that UCF-USF Classic on Black Friday of 2017. Here is now my interview with Adam Amin on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, UCF Rewind.
And joining us now, of course, he's the national broadcaster at ESPN. He's done it all. He's called college football, college basketball, college softball, college baseball, NBA, playoffs, Major League Baseball, NFL. You've done it all. He is Adam Amin, ladies and gentlemen, of ESPN, joining us here. Adam, hope everything's going well. I know in the unique circumstances, like a weird time, but glad for that you're joining us.
No, I appreciate that, man. It's good to hear your voice, good to talk to you, and good to catch up. It's I know a strange time, but we're all navigating as best as we can. So this gives, as I've been saying for the last 6 or 7 or however many 47 weeks we've been in this thing now, it feels like I've been saying the same thing. Just this doing stuff like this provides a little bit of normalcy, and that's what's been great about it.
Yeah, we miss your voice. We're so used to hearing your voice this time of year doing different things. So I'm just glad to hear your voice again. Like it's nice, and a lot of fans are, and certainly that's kind of been interesting, right? Because you and I, we're usually busy broadcasting games in different locations. You in particular, I mean, your schedule is amazing, like year round. Like where you going city to city doing different things, and it just keeps growing your responsibility. So this has to have been unique times for you as well, because you're used to doing multiple sports in multiple cities. We were talking about right before we went on the air. You'd be in the middle right now of doing NBA playoffs right now. Like a year ago, you and I were at Amway Center for the Magic playoff game against the Raptors. So it's kind of surreal from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's weird to pass up all these dates, and then and for so long, I would imagine you're kind of the same way too, Eric, where we kind of build our calendars and we have we associate certain events with time of year. I'm sure a lot of people do that in other professions too, but in particular, our calendar is the sports calendar. So I associate this time of year with, going back to March, since this whole thing started, I associate this time of year with conference tournaments, then March Madness, Women's Final Four, Major League Baseball, opening day, closing the regular season of the NBA, jumping into the NBA playoffs, which would have started, like you said, this past weekend. So marking all these dates, I get why this is happening. It's all good. It's just when you go through each of these little stretches, you go, oh man, that stinks. We didn't get to do that. And then more time passes and you go, oh man, that stinks. I didn't get to do that either. We'd be doing this right now. So it's so odd when you built your kind of lifestyle around the sport, frankly, the sports calendar. And I've done this out of work and out of necessity, but out of enjoyment too. It's been great. It's weird to just suddenly take a complete left turn and not just change your structure, but just do nothing, not have a structure. That's a very strange thing for a lot of us to do when we're kind of, so conditioned to the structure and the regiment of a yearly calendar.
It really is, and you nailed it. It is so real when you're used to, especially when it's a busy time of sports here where you're working a lot and you're used to a routine, and all of a sudden it's completely different. It is, you get it, but it's certainly surreal. It's you don't know what exactly you're doing on a daily basis, exactly, because you're used to doing something getting ready for a broadcast. That's what's so fascinating. Have you had a time during this time frame to kind of reflect, though, because a lot of people now have been watching a lot of games here, at UCF Black and Gold Banneret. They recently did a watch-along for the UCF South Florida Black Friday game, which you got to call with Dusty Dvorak and Molly McGrath. And even there, we were reminded, wow, what a great broadcast it was. And I remember when that game happened live, you were getting a lot of compliments on social media. And I think a lot of people, you got a lot of praise at that time, not just from fans, but even people on Twitter and social media and things like that, which, as you know, is not the most common thing to get praised on social media. But have you had a chance to reflect on that? Like the fact, man, oh yeah, maybe you've popped into a game team that you've run into that they're airing? Like, I know they've been airing a lot of women's Final Four games. They've called your walk-off for your national title games recently, which people have also enjoyed as well. Have you kind of reflected on that?
Yeah, I think the things that have stuck out, I would say, in the last few weeks, in particular, last like 3 or 4 weeks, you kind of have gotten to, you kind of come to the realization it really how non-essential you are. Like, in the sense of, like, sports, like, we're still a functioning society, right? Like, I know there's a lot of people struggling, all that. But for the most part, we're still functioning. Like, the world is moving. You know, while a lot of things have come to a halt, the world still moves. And we're still here. For, you know, a lot, you know, those of us lucky enough to be here, we're here. I think seeing that and seeing the world move on and sports just stop, you realize we're kind of non-essential in a lot of senses. So I get why we can't enjoy sports together right now. But in the other sense, I've also come to realize how much essentiality we bring to the kind of cultural landscape. Just sports in general does this. It drives so much of the conversation for such a large portion of the population. And then for the population that's more casual or maybe not, you know, not really sports fans, there's such cultural impact that you can't help but use sports as an entry point into conversation with other people. Like, it drives so much of how we think, what we think about. For so much of us, it's our livelihood. So when you don't have live games to talk about, I've seen how the cultural discussion has faded in a lot of ways, or at least has had to pivot to other things. Like you talked about, old games are on, things like that. And we can maybe relive the Twitter era discussion for a non-Twitter era event. Like, you know, watching The Last Dance this past week, watching the Bulls documentary, which is going to be our live sports, right? I mean,
Yep.
To me, I don't know how you felt, D'Lo, but like, to me, it felt like the other night we were watching live sports.
Yes.
So you saw on Twitter and then in the ensuing days how much of the conversation is driven by sports. And in this sense, not only it's driving the sports concept, but the cultural aspect of it too. So there's so much essentiality in it, in the same sense of looking at it. We're not essential, but in a lot of ways we're essential to the lifeblood of the culture of this country. So that has given me time to go back to the initial question about reflectivity. Like, yeah, this has been a good time to think about these things. Like, these are important events in some sense or fashion to people. This is a release. It might be, you know, a little bit of levity during their day, you know, their entertainment for the day, whatever it is. And we get to bring that to them, and reflecting on that these last few weeks, you know, this last month has been a healthy practice. I think it keeps you going. It keeps you motivated. The thought of going back out there and getting a chance to have some normalcy and have some fun again, like, that drives, you know, a little bit of the motivation to keep doing this.
No question about that. And you know, and just seeing you, because I've seen you in different sports as they've aired different things over this, it reminded me how versatile you are. And there's so many versatile broadcasters out there, but I don't know how many have that resume that you do. You've called, like I said, the women's Final Four. You've called men's college basketball. You've called college baseball. You've called volleyball, college softball. Did you ever imagine you'd be doing all of these sports? Because it's one thing for, you know, could some broadcaster do that, but it's not as easy to do as many sports as you've been able to do at a high level in a national landscape.
I think I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I think what I've come to realize is versatility for me was more of a buzzword than anything else. Like, until you become, you know, immersed in the industry, you don't really think about, like, when I first started doing this at 18, you know, consistently in college, my freshman year in college doing radio, like, you don't think about versatility as a thing. It's not a concept. You're just learning how to do the job. You're not thinking about, oh, well, I want to be or at least I wasn't. I shouldn't speak for other broadcasters, because so many other people knew they wanted to do this job long before I thought I knew I wanted to do this job. You know, I didn't realize I wanted to do this until I was about 18 or 19 years old. So for me personally, I didn't know what versatility meant. It was not a word in my vernacular when it came to broadcasting. When we had opportunities, it was, you know, at times they were few and far between as freshmen, you know, to jump in. So anytime you had a chance to do something, you did it. hey, you need somebody to host that broadcast on the radio, do the pregame and postgame and intermission show? Done. I'll do that. You need somebody to cut the highlights? Yeah, I can do that. You need somebody to do an update on the national scores? I can do that too. We're doing soccer tonight. We're doing volleyball tomorrow. Sure. Whatever you need, let's do it. And that's how I jumped into the business. And again, we were students. It wasn't even the business yet. But that's how I jumped in. So doing all these sports, it never really occurred to me that you weren't supposed to. I just kind of was under the assumption that you just did whatever you're supposed to do. Whatever's in front of you, you did. And this is what we had the chance to do, all these college sports, men's, women's, revenue, non-revenue. We just did everything. So when you get to your first job and you're doing football, basketball, high school wrestling in Iowa, I'm doing all of those things because I'm expected to do those. When I come to ESPN and I'm doing volleyball and football right out of the gate and then jumping in to do the wrestling championships and then baseball, softball, basketball, like the expectation is just do it. And then when you become a student of it and you go, oh, Marv Albert used to do like an NFL game, an NBA game, and then the 10 o'clock sportscast at night all in one day in New York. Like he would do that in the 60s and in the 70s. So you come to realize, oh, that's what versatility is. And I think that's the mentality that I bet you a lot of the broadcasters that we consider versatile, and you said it, Eric, there's so many great ones that we could rattle off a bunch of them right now. I bet a lot of them had the same kind of thought process when they first started. I bet a lot of them just thought, oh, we're just supposed to do this. I don't know what versatility is. I just want to do it. Whatever you give me, I'll do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Was there, because and I've told people this because people have asked me about how I got into calling softball. I started UCF, and I said it was kind of a fluke. That wasn't like my goal. Sure. It just happened that way. My goal growing up was always to be an NBA or college basketball play-by-play guy. That was always my goal. It was my favorite sport. That was the goal. The softball thing just kind of happened. It was a fluke. It was a situation where the person that was doing it was removed, and they needed somebody to do it. And at the time, I'm like, all right, I'll do it because it fits my schedule because I was covering NBA games at the time, shooting video for a basketball website. And I ended up getting hooked on it to the point now where I've been doing games now for 13 years and have expanded my role, obviously, in covering softball. Did you have a sport like that where you did it just because, hey, I got to do it, and you ended up liking it more than you ever thought to the point where you've enjoyed it now, still doing it? Because I'm sure you had a favorite sport growing up that you wanted to do that there was a goal.
Yeah, when I first started, I was a baseball guy, and I did 4 years of minor league baseball, and I always thought I would take the track of, well, I'll do the minors, and I'll move up in the minors, and I'll get a shot at a AA job, and then I'll get a AAA job, and then maybe I'll get to the majors one day. Like that was just the baseline concept for how you advance in this business, because that's what was in front of me. I got a minor league baseball job and thought, okay, this is a good way to do it. You do it every day. It's another chance to go out and do it. It was the most opportunities I get. Why wouldn't I do baseball? I just want to do the job. So that's how it started for me. And I thought baseball was going to be the path. And then obviously these opportunities come up. You do have to make money. And when you have a chance to go, do a broadcasting job and get paid for it, whatever it is, when it's Division II tennis or, whether it is the Women's College World, I did the Division II Women's World Series. When I was before I got hired at ESPN in 2011, that was an opportunity that came up. So I just did whatever was in front of me, and you get thrust into these different roles. So naturally, when you invest time into these things, like I did for tennis, it eventually becomes something like, oh, I'd love to do that. I didn't really care that much for high school wrestling in Iowa, but I did it because that was the job that was in front of me. So then when you get to ESPN and they say, hey, we saw you covered wrestling. We need somebody to call the wrestling championships. You want to do it? And I'm like, well, shoot, you're handing me as a rookie at ESPN, as a network announcer at 25 years old when I got the wrestling opportunity. You're handing me a championship. This is my first year, and you're telling me I get to call a championship? That's awesome. The year after that, I played volleyball, and that's why I wanted to do volleyball. I called a lot of volleyball in college. I did a lot of conference tournaments and, Division II stuff, high school stuff. So I naturally transitioned to calling volleyball. But, out of my second year, they go, hey, well, we'll give you the men's championship with Karch Karai if you want to do that. I was like, yes, I will do that. Of course I will do that. So you fall in love with more and more of these sports just when you get a little bit more of a foothold in them. And that's how I felt about wrestling, doing 5 championships. You know, I've called plenty of women's basketball in my life, but when they go, hey, here's the Final Four, you take it and you immerse yourself in it. And whatever the job is, especially when you get the chance to do a championship level event, you just want to go head first into it. So naturally your investment, and I hope your enjoyment because of the investment, goes up. And mine certainly has when I've invested myself in a lot of these sports.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same with me. I felt this way. This past fall, I got to do men's college soccer for the first time in a full-time basis, and I got to call an NCAA tournament game on a golden goal by UCF over a Missouri State to get to the Sweet 16 for the first time, and I ended up enjoying it more than I ever thought, and that's kind of what's the excitement of the industry is, because no matter what the sport is, I think you would agree, there's so many great storylines, right? And that's really part of what makes it exciting about sports is there's different stories from within in each sport, regardless of how popular the sport is or not. There's so many interesting stories within, and the excitement of the drama that's really I think it's one of the reasons why we all get into this, right?
Yeah. I mean, you hope for, the big finish in the game that has the biggest stakes. That's all you're hoping for. That's all any of us is hoping for when we jump into a job or we know we have a game coming up, regardless of the stakes going into the game. We want the highest stakes for that particular game possible at the end of it. And if it so happens the stakes were already huge coming in, then you get the Enrique walk-off. You get, moments like that. You get, Rachel Garcia at the World Series, to go to the Champ Series. You get the walk-off like that. You get Tua Tagovailoa's pass to beat Georgia in overtime for a championship. LeBron beating the Raptors at the buzzer. Like, you get these chances. So they're so few and far between, it feels like, to get like the perfect game, the biggest stakes with the best moment. It's so hard to find. Like, people go their lifetimes, they go their careers not getting to see stuff like that, let alone get to call stuff like that. So to be a part of those moments is what you hope for. You live for that stuff. And when you get to actually experience it, I hope that for everybody. I hope for everybody who wants to do this particular job that they get something like that. Because everybody works really hard. You invest so much of your time and so much emotion into doing the job. I hope that all of you who do it and put that much investment in it get something like that at some point in your career where you just know this was the moment. The stakes were at their highest. We had the best moment possible at the end of that huge stakes game. And then we get the result, and hopefully you're on top of the call for it.
And one of the games, sporting events, one of many great games you've called in different sports, one that jumps out is the Black Friday 2017. UCF and South Florida, game with high stakes. Winner was going to win the division, move on to the American Conference Championship game against Memphis. UCF was undefeated at the time. You had the Scott Frost storyline. You take me through that. What was that week like as you were preparing for that game? Just take me through that as you guys are getting ready for all these storylines and how you prepare. Give us an idea. Did you realize at that time, wow, this could be a really big game, an exciting game? How do you kind of go into it?
Well, what was cool about that particular week, and obviously it's Thanksgiving, it's rivalry weekend, so you're going to get high stakes games throughout the country. But we just felt like, listen, we got one of the undefeated. It's like there's not that many undefeated teams. I want to say going into that week there were 4. I'm pretty sure it was Miami, UCF, Alabama, and Wisconsin. Yep. I think those were the 4 unbeaten teams going into Black Friday weekend, going into Thanksgiving 17. And we had the doubleheader. I knew the first thing that we do when we get our assignment, I always look, what's the game what time is our game? Obviously, what network are we on? Okay, 3:30, we get our Excel spreadsheet or whatever that our boss sends out, and we see, all right, 3:30, Friday, ABC, what's on before us and what's on after us? That's what I need to know. What am I pumping up coming up, and what do I need to know about the game before us? Well, shoot, Miami is playing Pitt, and Miami is number 2 in the country. They're unbeaten. I know Bob Wischusen and Brock Heward and Allison Williams had the game. I've had good relationships with them, so I'll text Bob or Brock or Allison, hey, is there a nugget you got? I didn't need to bug them. I was like, hey, Miami's unbeaten right now going into Thanksgiving. They're number 2 in the country. They've got one of the best resumes. They could get into a showdown with Clemson in the ACC championship game. Like, that's what we're thinking. So now I have that as a setting. I know who the unbeatens are. Well, sure enough, we get a game where Miami gets upset by Pitt. And now there's only 3 unbeaten teams left. So we have to not only shift our narrative right at the top, and if you watch the broadcast back in the open, I set Dusty up to talk about Miami and Pitt, because now the Knights are the only unbeaten team in the state of Florida, too. So there's so much more hype in the driving moments up to the game that we had to be so flexible. And I think for me, what was fun about that particular week of prep, and I hope this is the specificity that you're looking for, Elo. This is the type. This is kind of where my head was at. I talked to Richard Johnson of SB Nation. You know, all those folks do such a great job covering college football and Banner Society and all that. Richard asked me to do an interview about the game, and I had read some of his research and some of the stuff that he had put out, and I realized the background of the game and the 2 universities. They were fresh programs. Remember, the stories of South Florida coaches sitting in trailers getting peppered by batting practice baseballs because that's the only offices that they could afford at one point. UCF, the transition into FBS in Division I, to be a program for only about 20 years or so. Like we get to build up a little bit of these histories at the same time because there's such high stakes to the game. So that week of prep leading up and the hype that surrounded it was about as high as anything we'd had all year. And probably it would be as high as going back to like late September when we had a top 20 Friday night matchup with USC getting upset by Washington State. Like, we had a crazy year that year, and this game, this war on I-4, had about as high stakes as any game we'd seen. And so sorry for the long answer, Elo, but I think that's what you're looking for.
No, that's fantastic. Please, that's phenomenal stuff, because I think it's great to get that perspective going in, because it's such a significant game at that time. I was trying to remember. Was that wasn't your first? Was that your first time at the Bounce House there, or have you been there before?
No,
You've called games there, right?
I've been there one time. I'd done UCF Tulane.
That's right.
In 2014, I think that's right around the time that we'd gotten to know each other a little bit.
Yes.
In those couple of years is when I started to see some bigger college softball games. You and I would cross paths a little bit, or at least talk a little bit.
Yeah. That's right. I remember that now, because I remember it was a noon game, and you told me, and I'm like, hey, how long are you sticking around? I'm like, not long. I'm actually got a flight. I got to do another game. So at that time, I was starting to learn how chaotic your schedule can be at times, which is kind of wild on that. But so you've had experience there, but still the environment that
it was
day.
Nothing. Oh yeah, nothing. It was nothing. 2014 with. At the Bounce House, it was at Spectrum was nothing like the 17 game. Tulane, UCF was in a tough spot in 2013. They had a good year in 2014. So that was really the last time I had seen them. I'd done UCF's bowl game. I think they had lost in the Bitcoin Bowl to NC State that year.
Yes.
And I don't think I had seen UCF since. I had always kind of just thought of them on the periphery. The American Conference games I was doing at that time were like Navy, Memphis. Memphis had Justin Fuente around that time, and they were rolling. That was right before he took the Virginia Tech job. Navy had Keenan Reynolds at the controls. We thought Cincinnati was a solid team, a 9 or 10 win team with like Tommy Tuberville as the head coach. So that was what we were thinking about with the American at that point. And then you have that year, that 2015 season where UCF just looked god awful, winless team, that brutal season. So we hadn't really been back to UCF. I hadn't really paid attention. I think the only time I thought about UCF in that stretch, other than when I'm writing down conference notes about teams when I do a conference game, maybe that awful Thanksgiving, that maybe there was the war on I-4 from 2015, that Thanksgiving night game that was just it was like a no-win team versus like a 2-win team. It was just a terrible game. And I think that's what most people were associating UCF with. USF had bounced back the year after. They had a decent year in 2016. And obviously UCF had improved, but USF was like in the mix for like a division title midway through the American year that year. It wasn't until 17 where UCF was back on the map at all. And it took a while to get there. And it took, the types of performances we saw that season to get back to respectability. And it happened very quickly. So the atmosphere matched the hype over the course of that week.
What was it like talking to Scott Frost as you're preparing for the game? Because it was such a unique time, and you guys even addressed it on the broadcast. There were so many rumors, and you guys didn't even have to deal with what transpired the week later, where it turns out we found out he's going to Nebraska, and Todd McShay was kind of put in the awkward spot where you had to ask him after they won the American Conference title game. You guys were a week before that. Molly McGrath, who was doing sideline this game, asked him about his future at that time after the game. But what was that like, talking to him and then trying to figure out that storyline? Because I forgot, watching back the game, there would be highlights of the Nebraska game against Iowa. You guys would be coming in, they'd be getting highlights to you guys. And then there was even the Missouri-Arkansas game, which that turned out to be when Brett Bielema got fired on the field right after the game. And something that I didn't realize until I rewatched the game, and it's so ironic now looking back, Dusty Dvorak after one of the Missouri highlights was praising then offensive coordinator Josh Heupel.
That's right.
And you guys, what a great job he's doing in Missouri. Little did we know that would foreshadow down the road he would end up being the UCF head coach, which is kind of wild. Like, the odds of that are just insane. Mm-hmm. But what was that like for you guys, how to handle the Scott Frost story and how you dealt with him?
I think Molly and I had experience with this. And Dusty, again, this was Dusty's first year on ESPN. He had been on ESPNU the year prior. So this was only like year 2 or 3 of Dusty calling games. Molly and I had the chance to work the MAC championship game the year prior as the Friday night crew with Mac Brown. And we had PJ Fleck in the MAC title game at Western Michigan when they were undefeated, going into the MAC title game against Frank Solich's Ohio team, which had a good year that year, 8 or 9 wins, if I'm not mistaken. So we knew that PJ had a lot of rumors surrounding him. So we kind of talked it out, Molly and I, before the MAC title game in 2016, like, how do you want to say it? And we kind of worked together in terms of like some wording, and Molly did such a good job of actually executing it. It's such a crazy spot for those reporters to be in when they have to ask these types of questions. You hate asking it. No one likes asking these questions, whether it's pre or post game. Especially post game, I don't like asking these, or I feel uncomfortable having to ask them or being on a crew that has to ask them because it's tough. These are tough spots to put these people in. It's not comfortable, but you have to do it. You're doing your due diligence when the stories are out. You have to be on top of that, or at least be acknowledging of that. How much so is up to you personally and editorially as a crew. So Molly and I had some experience with how to deal with that. PJ, of course, took the Minnesota job not long after. So when we went into this game, we had heard all the rumors. We knew Scott's parents were still in Lincoln. Like, we know the connectivity. We have all these highlights. I think we showed some Scott Frost highlights, if I'm not mistaken, from his days playing at Nebraska. Obviously, a couple of option plays that we automatically made reference to with Scott Frost at Nebraska, with how well McKenzie and, guys like Adrian Killens ran that option on a couple of plays. So naturally, we make reference to these things. We have to discuss them intelligently. And we try to be as unbiased as possible. So that means asking the questions. So I remember being in Scott's office and kind of being like, how are you going to approach this? How do you approach this? And to his credit, I'm not going to go back and try to remember exactly what he said. That'd be doing a disservice to him. But I do remember him giving a very good, not just diplomatic, but nuanced answer about how he would go about the process of this. And I thought PJ Fleck did a similar thing. He gave us a similar, nuanced answer about it. Then the game comes. PJ Fleck did not answer the question. He completely skipped over it, which is fine. That's his prerogative. Our due diligence means we have to ask, which Molly did. Molly asked again in this particular game too. And you're not going to get a ton out of there, nor, again, it is his right. Now, it is also our right to dictate how we feel about how you handled it. And I hope coaches realize that Scott handled it very well. I thought Scott handled the whole process really well. I mean, going from maybe our game or the game right before our game until the Peach Bowl. I thought Scott handled everything very well without giving the boat away. Like he never really really showed his hand, but he never lied about anything. I don't think he was being deceitful. I think he was trying to be as careful as possible. Now, that might just be my bias because I like Scott as a human being. I don't think he's a jackass. I think there are plenty of coaches who are. I don't think Scott's one of them. So naturally, the way I felt about it was going to dictate partially how I spoke about it. But I think we handled it fairly well, and I give Scott, to this day, a lot of credit with how he handled that whole situation.
We'll be right back with more with Adam Amin after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Now let's return to our interview with Adam Amin.
Speaking with Adam Amin, of course, ESPN broadcaster. The game was kind of crazy, right? USF scores right away on the first drive, blows a big play, go up.
Unarguably the best touchdown of the game.
Right.
You could argue that Tyree McCants touchdown was the best touchdown of the game.
Tyree McCants with space. And there goes Tyree McCants. Inside the 5 and in! What a touchdown!
It really was. I mean, that was an exciting play, breaking the play open, just setting the tone early. And then UCF would come back. They would respond. They would actually go up 2 touchdowns. And I remember thinking and being there in the press box, oh, boy, this could get out of hand.
Yeah, I thought 21-7. I was like, oh, man, this could get really ugly.
Yeah, so you thought the same thing. As you're going through this in your mind, you're kind of like, because you're obviously describing what's going on, so you don't want to think about what could happen. But at the same time, I mean, depending on how a game flows, will dictate in a lot of ways how the broadcast goes. Because you've done these, we've all done these games where they're blowouts, and now you got to think about other material to discuss. So you almost have to be prepared for anything. And I thought at the end of the first quarter, wow, this could be a long game. Little did we know, South Florida, to their credit, and Quentin Flowers would come back, and all of a sudden we got a game at halftime. When did you think? What point did you say, hey, you know what? This is going to be an incredible game. This actually is not only going to maybe live up to the excitement, but might even surpass it.
I think it was once we got to halftime. When we got to halftime and we had a close game, we had I think it was a 1-point game.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken,
21-20.
right around there.
Yep, 21-20. Yeah.
As soon as we got back to 21-20, I thought, all right, South Florida's not going away. And Flowers looked sharp. He was in command of the offense, and I had no doubt about UCF's offense. We didn't, and neither one. These were the top 2 offensive teams in the conference that year. They were 2 of the top 20 offense. UCF was top 5. USF was a top 15 offense in college football that year. So it's not like we didn't expect points. But when it got to 21-7, we were worried. When it got back to 21-20, we were alleviated. I felt relieved. And I think that's when we knew. And once it really started to trade the punches, that's when, I mean, we were white knuckling it, I think, most of the second half. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like, hey, who knows where we're going next? We didn't have much of a dictation for this. We didn't have much of a concept for how this game was the rest of the game was going to go in terms of the back and forth nature of it. We just thought it'd be like close. We were like, all right, let's keep it within 10. I think we'll stay within 2 possessions. And then we'll, maybe one of these teams will start to pull away late in the 4th, because that's all you're hoping for, right?
Yeah.
We're like, all right, hey, we got a halftime, we got a 1-point game. Let's keep it close, boys, and let's try to get to the finish line with a 1-possession game. Little did we know that that's what it would turn out to be.
Yeah, it was just a wild deal. And then USF had missed an extra point. There were both teams went for it on 4th downs, didn't convert. You had everything here to analyze, which was, and the tempo of the game was unbelievable too. From both sides, because big plays were coming in chunks. And the irony is, at the end of the half, it was Mike Hughes who got an interception to kind of preserve that lead going into the locker room. Little did we know that Mike Hughes would make a bigger play down the road in the game. What was your thoughts seeing Mackenzie Milton? And obviously we know the story since. he had that horrific injury a year later in the same rivalry game in Tampa, and he's still recovering and things like that. But what was your thoughts on Mackenzie Milton, watching him in person at that time, and even that UCF team as a whole? I mean, there's a bunch of guys on that team since that have moved on to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we met Mackenzie, and I think we were one of the first crews to really kind of dive further in. And I don't want to discredit the other crews, but we had the chance on an ABC broadcast to really show his story to a large chunk of the country. I think that was the first time maybe UCF that year with Milton had really had that chance. So to kind of go back to his mechanics, and Dusty really wanted to break him down. And we got to hear the story about, and please forgive me and correct me, Elo.
Yeah.
I want to say it was Mario Verduzco. Verduzco?
Yeah.
Verduzco, correct. All right. I wanted to make sure I had that correct. Mario Verduzco, we heard the entire story about how he really helped Mackenzie develop those mechanics. And that's what stuck out to Dusty. And our crew was really good about letting Dusty dictate how we talk about guys. Like, I wanted to empower him, and our producer wanted to empower him to talk about these guys, and we'll build the broadcast around it. So when Dusty looks at film, and he's a great film guy, he noticed mechanics right away. So he's like, all right, let's talk about that. How did you get there? And we had this great story about Mario, and we shared that at a good time during a review. We had time to break that down. We really got to dive deep into some of what made Mackenzie Milton great. And obviously he played phenomenal football. He played a great game that night. I mean, the Griffin story is just, we really got to go back to the top and tell that story, even going back to the days with Shaquille when he was at UCF, and the package deal story, and talking. I think I can't remember their mom's name. I think Terry is their father, who created the armband for him with the prosthetic to be able to do weights and do bench pressing. So we really got to break down those two big stories and maybe introduce a lot of people. I think Mike Hughes definitely earned himself some money in that game. I think some GMs and scouts were like, "Hey, this guy can do some stuff. Let's take another look at this guy." And I think Mike Hughes earned himself some real looks and maybe some dollars with that great performance in that game too. So, and not to discredit any of the USF guys, they have NFL guys. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, has been a USF guy who made his way to the NFL. Like, they're great linebackers out of USF. They've got some talent. They had a lot of guys. They had a lot of dudes on that team. So, the running back position's been very fruitful for them. Dearness Johnson had some big moments in that game. Obviously, Flowers was on the Bengals roster for a little while in the following season in 18. So the talent level, I think back on fondly. I go, man, we got to see some guys who still have bright futures ahead of them. That's what was fun about the personnel in that game.
No, it really is. I mean, and that's kind of sometimes a cool thing when you go back and watch. You forget that. Oh, wait, that's right. That guy was on that team. Like, Gabe Davis, who's going to be in this year's draft for UCF. He was in that game as a freshman. Called and things like that. Traquan Smith is with the New Orleans Saints. You mentioned the Bulls players. I mean, there's so many talent that I think that's kind of one of the fun things. And I think a lot of people are going to do that with the LSU-Alabama game from this past year. When you look at the NFL guys, they're going to have years from now like, wow. That's how people look at that Miami-Ohio State National Championship game in 2003. That's how people look at that game with the insane amount of first-round talent. 5 guys or something out of the first round in that draft. There was like a handful of Hall of Famers, football Hall of Famers, or pro football Hall of Famers in that class for both those teams. Insane. It was insane. Some of the talents there for sure. Let's go back now to the late fourth quarter, which really the last 5 minutes is an unbelievable. I mean, it's one of the many reasons why I think a lot of people voted as the game of the year in college football that year. UCF was up 35-34. Milton hits Otis Anderson for 23 yards on that screen to score a touchdown with 2:21. At this point, I'm on the field. It's 42-34. Some people around me joked, well, maybe they scored too early. Well, it turned out they might have been right. They were right because South Florida comes back, and then Quentin Flowers, 83 yards to Darnell Solomon. 42-40. I remember your call was incredible. It was a wild, and then he hit the 2-point play. and then Mike Hughes gets the kickoff return for a touch. Just take me through that last 5 minutes, which had to be hectic, an amazing 5 minutes there, 4.5 minutes, if you will, of that game.
Yeah, I mean, the setup for Otis Anderson was that's something I get. We get a lot of tweets about that still to this day, and I just appreciate that so much because it means you did something right. Which, by the way, I go back and listen to the call because the UCF Twitter account will tweet it out once in a while, and the people who run that are super nice people, and they're always so kind to me. I think I said we had a setup for Otis. Like we had, it just happened to be the right time to tell the story about how like he was heavily sought after, highly recruited player, but UCF had like the program that he wanted. I think it was a high level academic program that he was really set on pursuing. So UCF was his spot, and then we show a close up of him and say he's one of the key cogs now in Scott Frost's offense. And the next play was blitz from the Bulls. It's a screen against the blitz, the perfect play. Oh, and I was so happy with that call, but I don't, and people are so forgiving because, they get the part of it that they want, the excitement of the call. But I also said he may have sealed the deal for UCF. I wasn't wrong, but I really wish I would have said something different because it just seems like you're calling it too early. Mm-hmm. I wasn't exactly wrong because I hedged it, but if I'm hedging something, I'd rather make a more definitive call on it. I'd rather have just said, a screen against the blitz, the perfect play, touchdown Otis Anderson, and then just shut up. I almost try to get too cute with it, and I'm not sad about it. I don't think it's bad. I'm thankful that we had such a great finish to be able to, negate somewhat of what I feel is my own mistakes.
Big blitz from the Bulls. It's a screen against the blitz. The perfect play. Otis Anderson may have sealed the deal for UCF.
I appreciate UCF fans being so nice to me about it. So we're all excited. It was a good call. It was a good sequence for us as a crew. We told the story. We got the right guy on the next play with the touchdown. That's good TV, right?
Yeah.
So now we're thinking, all right, Quentin Flowers, you got a shot. Still plenty of time. 2 minutes to go at this point. And out of the gate, they get that play to Darnell Solomon, busted coverage. Solomon goes. And just like that, now it's 100 seconds to go. They're down by 2. You're thinking, well, no, this is a real game, man. There's still a long way to go. Great play call on the 2-point conversion. We get to say, Dearness Johnson, tie game, 42 apiece. And the crowd is stunned at that point. The back-to-back gut punches back to the fans.
Clock moves inside at 2 minutes. Flowers has a man. It is caught! Darnell Solomon, touchdown Bulls! Flowers looking, has a man, tie game! Dearness Johnson makes it 42 all.
USF ties the game, and then you get the moment. We're doing our due diligence. Remember, special teams plays happen in a vacuum. They just blow up. They happen just like that. So we almost kind of treat them as our bridge to get to the next thing. And the next thing at that point is Mackenzie Milton. Now we got to talk about Mackenzie Milton getting set up for the next offensive series. Or we go back and talk about Flowers and put a bow on this incredible school record performance he's put together. He had almost as much total offense himself as UCF did. Like, he was responsible rushing and passing for most of the offense that night, almost 600 yards worth, if not more. So, like, we're trying to hit all these different points, and I think we did a good job of it. And then we get to the kickoff, and we're like, all right, settle back in, 42 apiece, 141 left, and then the call. And it's like Mike Hughes, with a head of steam, and Mike Hughes, the kicker to beat. Do you believe it?
Mike Hughes with a head of steam, and Mike Hughes, the kicker to beat. Do you believe it? Knights take
I don't know why it came to me. I know I'm probably somehow going to credit my buddy Joe Davis on this, because I think he had a call on a Dodger play. And for those who don't know, Joe Davis does Fox college football and Major League Baseball, and is also the voice of the Dodgers. And he is one of the best broadcasters in the game, and he's one of my close friends. And I remember kind of almost in the back of my mind remembering a call that I had heard recently from him on like a Dodger game. And these were big Dodger games, towards the end of the year. And obviously that was the year they went to the World Series. So late 2017, like they're rolling it off and they're crushing it. And I remember Joe's voice, and maybe somewhere in the back of my head, I had thought of that. But the feeling of it was that. And that's why those words came to me first. And I almost feel bad saying it. Like, I feel like I ripped him off, which I didn't. But it's just because it was in my head. And that's the thing that came. I was so shocked, not just by that play, but I think, Eric, you're right. These last few minutes had just taken us every which way. And the shock of that moment, that's what I was feeling. I couldn't believe it. And I said, do you believe it? Mike Hughes, with that incredible play, just capped off, this maybe one of the best sequences in college football, maybe the best outside of, like the Rose Bowl that year with Georgia and Oklahoma,
Sure.
Or the championship with Georgia and Alabama. That might have been the wildest sequence in college football.
In your defense, everybody was saying, "Can you believe it?" Everybody on down, because the media at that point, a lot of them were downstairs. They were in the press box.
Oh, sure.
And everybody, I've never seen, being down on the field, the chaos that went after that Mike Hughes touchdown and the emotion.
Yeah.
And everybody was like caught up in it. They're caught up in it. They're like they're jumping. Like, what? Do you believe what we just seen here? I've never seen that place, and I've been going to games there since it opened in 2007 when that stadium opened. I've never seen that place as bonkers as those last few minutes and that play. I mean, it was unbelievable. And what's crazy is the game wasn't over. South Florida actually drove. They were driving until, unfortunately, Mitch Wilcox, the poor young man who caught the pass from Flowers, fumbled the ball. Richie Grant made a heck of a play in that play, forced a fumble, and Shaquan Burkett recovered it at the UCF 46-yard line. Otherwise, we could still be playing if that would have happened.
Absolutely.
Flowers to the sticks for the first down. Wilcox lost the football. UCF has it with 39 seconds to go.
No doubt. And I just a gut punch of that moment, as big of a moment as it was for UCF, and obviously the crowd was going nuts, but we stuck with Wilcox in terms of what we talked about. And I remember what I said going to the replay, because we milked the fans. The fans' reaction was awesome. Obviously, the UCF bench was going nuts. They knew that was it. They'd sealed it. But we went back to the shot of Wilcox. His teammates are hugging him, arm around him. He's on his knees for a little longer. Like, your gut, like, was wrenching watching that kid. And all I could think was at that moment, because the Hughes moment happened. We had UCF taking the lead. So I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I think I was giving you the story and the right picture. Our director, Anthony DeMarco, on that show is just so good. And he had so many great shots with that sky cam all night too. But like that shot of Wilcox just was gut wrenching. And I felt for the kid. And I just thought, like, your heart, you got to be heartbroken for that kid right now. And then you turn you pivot, and it's like, and here's UCF, and you got this final minute, or so to kind of wax poetic about the incredible accomplishment. And then the graphic comes up at the end. I think they were the second team all time to go from winless to undefeated in the regular season 2 years later. I want to say it was like Minnesota in like the 60s or something was the other team to do it at that point. So UCF has this incredible historic accomplishment, and I thought we did a good job of putting a bow on it. And it's a division title, and it's a chance at Memphis next week. It'll be, it'll be a high scoring affair. So I think we put the right touches on the whole thing at the end. And I was really proud walking out that night. You know, we went out to a bar over by our hotel, a sports bar, to watch, you know, the last game of the night and to, you know, have some dinner. And I was just really proud of how everybody went about their business over the course of what ended up being, you know, one of the more memorable nights of my career, and certainly one of the more memorable and, I think, enjoyable broadcasts that I've ever been a part of.
Where does that rank? I mean, you've done so many games; it's hard to rank them, obviously. But that was, and you know, we've talked about it though. You and the crew and everybody got a lot of praise on social media, which, as you know, is not the easiest thing to get unanimous, you know, from that standpoint. But I remember Richard Deitch, who obviously covers this very closely, was at Sports Illustrated at the time. He's now at The Athletic. He praised you and the work you did for that game. I mean, everybody, which is just about everybody that watched that game, enjoyed what they were watching, not just because it was a great game, but the broadcast and the presentation that had, not that you seek that, but I have to believe that's one of those that you kind of feel that's right up there, right? One of your favorites. And you had to, you know, I don't know if you were aware of that, what was going on, of all the praise that was going on during the game. Obviously you're not, you're focused on the game, but I'm sure you got about it afterwards.
You know, a little bit during the game though, too, because when that game started to get hot, it was at a great time. That's why that 3:30, I've done that 3:30 Black Friday slot on ABC 3 times. And I love that time slot. It's just like, I don't know what it is. You don't have to put the biggest game there, but the audience just shows up for that because it's the right time. I think you get to 3:30 Eastern. 2015, I did Nebraska, Iowa. Iowa's undefeated, 11-0, trying to get to 12-0 at that point. Nebraska, if they win, they go to a bowl game. 2017 was the Warren I-4. 2018, I did the Virginia Tech-Virginia game, the first game in the Commonwealth Cup's history that ever went to overtime. Unreal game. Like, and the audiences for that game, I think maybe just because you get to 6 o'clock Eastern, people are probably done shopping for the day. They probably ate, you know, a lot of leftovers when they got home about 4 or 5 o'clock. And I think 6 o'clock, everybody's starting to settle in. And you get to 7 o'clock and you're getting to, you know, the end of these games, 6:30, 7 o'clock. And when that game starts to get hot, probably even earlier than that, but like you said, Elo, it was great for so long of that game. You know, you get to maybe 5:30. I'm starting to get some texts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do my best not to check Twitter too often, but sometimes I like to check it because, you know, you'll get some instant feedback, or, you know, you'll learn something, or, you know, I also like to look at the beat writers that keep lists of, you know, beat writers and stat guys to follow during games for teams I'm doing that week. So, you know, you can keep up to date with some stories. So, you know, I'm looking at Twitter and there's a lot of buzz. My phone's starting to blow up because people are going, dude, this game. Sean McDonough texted me during that game. And I was so proud to feel like if you get Sean doesn't throw bouquets. And Sean's a very helpful and complimentary and kind person. But he doesn't throw bouquets for the sake of throwing them. If he says something positive, he means it. And to get, you know, a text from him during the game, to have the guys in studio, you know, Kevin Nagandi was in studio during that game, one of my close friends in this business. And, you know, he and I are texting back and forth during the game. And Dusty's buddies are texting him. Guys who he played with the Bears are tuning in to watch this game. So, like, I think it started to get hot, and I was aware that it was one of those games, but in the moment, you try not to let that affect you, which is hard, but you try not to let it affect you. You just do the job. You refocus your attention to the priority, and the priority is what's happening in front of you, and that helps to kind of stay in the moment. And I think looking back, Elo, it's hard to rank for sure, but And this is not something I knew at the time. You never understand these things in the moment. You need time away from them and time to pass to realize what they actually mean in context. And for me, that was like a turning point. You know, that was one of the turning points of my career that night. You know, to have that game with that sequence on that stage with those stakes, that was a turning point for me as a broadcaster. To know I could handle the big moments a little bit better than I had in years past. And sure enough, that was the start of the year where we have that game. We get the Enrique sequence at the Final Four that year.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then you get the LeBron buzzer beater in the NBA playoffs on radio, and all these calls go viral and all these moments go viral, and it's like, all right, that UCF game was a little bit of a turning point for me to feel like I belonged a little bit. I think I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that's kind of what it feels like. Like you finally feel like, hey, am I allowed in the club yet? Like, am I allowed to hang out with you guys yet? I feel like the dork who just got invited to the party by accident, and now finally, you sit down at the piano and you play a song, and everybody goes, "Hey, I like this guy." That's what it felt like, and I in that sense, I can look back at it and feel like it's one of the most important nights of my career. And like I said, it's certainly one of the most memorable and enjoyable. But it was truly important for me as a broadcaster to feel confident in your abilities. And by the way, I don't think that goes unnoticed by people like you. I don't think that goes unnoticed by fans, and I don't think that goes unnoticed by people who make decisions. And that's not the fun part of this job to think about, because that's the part of the job that'll make you crazy, is the how am I doing? Am I good? Pat me on the head, please. But it is nice to feel like you did the job well, and that people that care believe that you did a good job that night and you did that game justice. That's a good feeling.
I agree. And yeah, there's something about that, right? When you call a college football game, it's just different than other sports. It gets you a different plateau. Like, it's funny, like I've done all these different sports, and yet this past year I got to fill in, calling a UCF men's basketball game on the radio because our radio voice, Mark Daniels, was doing football that same day against Tulane. And the feedback getting from men's basketball, it was almost like, that it was kind of weird. Like it was just a regular season college basketball, but it's a big deal. There's certain games, you're right, where even though you've done great work prior to that, that's a game where everybody kind of catches on. And now at that point, it's like, oh, sweet, Adam Amin's calling the game, or so-and-so. Now they're looking forward to it because they know they remember that great game, and they're like, wow, I can't wait. And you're right, that kind of started, I forgot that the Final Four, that was the crazy Final Four year where you had the Notre Dame-UConn game, the semifinal, they went overtime, and then the Notre Dame-Mississippi State title game, which was an incredible Final Four. It's arguably one of the best women's Final Fours ever. And obviously there's still the visual. They had that video camera set up on you guys as you're calling it, which had to be unique now as you see that.
For sure. And it cemented those moments for me. And here's the other thing too, Eric, and you know this, I'm sure most people do it. And I'm sure some people I sometimes feel like I talk about this too much, but it's an important thing to me. Like that, that month was brutal. That month my dad died. It was probably at that point what I would consider to be the worst moment of my life. I still do, which I think if there's a positive in being able to pinpoint that and knowing that, hey, it's never been worse than that. Anything that you deal with now, it'll never be worse than the feeling you had when you found that out. So that month sucked. It was not a fun month. And then when we started to get into this, flow of the Final Four, and this was my first one, I was really like, hey, I think this could be the night where I come back. It feels like you're yourself again. And when we had that Enrique moment in the semis, I thought, wow, I needed that. I needed that to feel kind of myself again. Like, hey, we had this fun moment. I got to enjoy it with everything I had, with people that I care about, that I love working with, and being able to see all of that, knowing those feelings, and then being able to go back and see that video from the semifinals of that, and like that, I remember exactly how I felt at each millisecond of that video, and even like collapsing on, Kara's shoulder and her giving me the fist pound and all that, in that semifinal. I was just like, man, thank you. And I figured, hey, maybe that, like in your spirituality or whatever, like you think, hey, maybe Dad gave that to you. Maybe that was a gift, and that gave me some comfort, and I felt like myself again. And then to get it again 2 nights later, and I'm in my office right now, and I have this collage of photos on my wall of just important ones from games and stuff. And I have, me and Doris Burke, my first NBA game, the Iron Bowl, from 2013, my view from the booth, Wrigley Field, my first NBA playoff game with Steph Curry in an interview, the picture of me and Steph and PJ Carlesimo. And then in the middle of it is me, Kara, and Rebecca after Enrique hits the shot, after I make the call, and after we all lay out. And, I backed away from the table just because of relief. I hit the call and then I got out of the way and I was like, oh, thank God. Now I can shut up for a while. I don't have to say anything. I can gather my thoughts. But Kara gave me the fist bump, and I just hugged her and reached out for Rebecca. And that moment when I reach out for Rebecca and I'm hugging Kara is the middle of that photo collage. And I think back to that moment because I just remember thinking these two did so much, along with Holly Rowe. These people did so much to carry me through the month. And after that, when I let them go, I look up, and on the video, and that's why, like you said, you can kind of relive this over and over and over again. I instinctually looked up and I said, I love you, to my dad. And I just thought, I look back on that now and I go, this was like one of the seminal moments of my life. And it was the thing that kind of got me feeling normal again. And it made me feel like that first one kind of made me feel normal. And the championship one, the second one, that kind of helped me turn the corner, and I know that might sound a little weird. And sometimes I worry that the job, had such an impact on me personally. But in my head, I just kind of look at that moment and I can relive it watching that video that you talked about, man. I can relive it over and over again. And I know exactly how I felt, and I can pinpoint that now and say that was a turning point. Not only that, that UCF game was a turning point in my career. The Final Four was a major boost for my career, but it was also a turning point moment in my life. And that video and seeing that and looking back at that means a lot. And I think it's that you're one of the first people I've told that to in an interview before. I can very much feel all of that looking back on it now. No, thanks for the question, man. I appreciate you asking that, and I'm sorry for the rambling answer, but it's just it does mean a lot. And I appreciate you asking that.
No, I appreciate you sharing that because you're right. I remember you. Obviously, when that happened, because obviously you were scheduled to do the American Men's Basketball Championship, and obviously that's
right in Orlando.
That's right. And I remember I was, oh man, I got to get to see you hang out with Adam, but then that unfortunately happened. I remember, but I can relate to that because I've had family issues. A couple of years ago, my mom was in very bad health, and it's tough. And it was kind of, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was meanwhile broadcasting a UCF sporting event, and in a weird way, that helped me get through it.
Totally.
She turned out, thankfully on the positive end. But in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like that Final Four, as maybe as difficult as it was to get back to broadcasting, maybe helped you, as you mentioned, in those games and being with people you care about. Because I know you really enjoyed working with, or still do, with Rebecca Lobo, obviously, as you mentioned, and Holly Rose, the sideline there, and of course, Lawson there, who's now with the Celtics. But that also probably helped as well, as being around people you cared about, and they were there for you, and maybe helped you, get through that.
Oh, no doubt. I tell the story about Holly, where, the day after my dad passed. No, I hadn't really told many people about it, but she was one of the first people to find out. And I guess that's just funny, being the reporter that she is. Maybe that's why she was so good at finding out. But she found out, and there was a $100 gift certificate to my favorite taco place in Chicago sitting in my email, like when I woke up the next day. And that's the type of person Holly is. Like that's a story that I think encompasses her as well as anybody. Just so thoughtful. Rebecca has become one of my close friends and one of the best people, unbelievable player, Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame broadcaster, Hall of Fame mom, Hall of Fame wife, Hall of Fame person. And Kara is the best basketball mind I've ever met. And I have never met anybody who thinks about the game the way she does. I think she's one of the smartest people I've ever met, period. Forget about basketball, just period. And is just cool and understanding and empathetic, and just, these are great human beings. And that's not even talking about like the crew, like I had a great producer, great director, keeping everybody together. Like that's important in this job. So I try to talk about those people as much as possible because they are so important to what we do. But that, I felt invested in these people because they felt invested in me. And that, I think that goes a long way in like terms of broadcast chemistry and like what you guys watch for and what you guys enjoy. You want to enjoy who you're listening to, right? You want to feel like the people you're investing 2.5 to 4 hours on your couch with while you're watching a game, you want to like these people. And for you to like them means that they need to like each other. And I think that's how it's played out with a lot of the crews that I've been lucky to be on.
Appreciate what you do, man. We miss your voice. We hope to hear your voice soon, play-by-play. But in the meantime, I'm glad you're doing okay, my friend. And thank you so much for doing this. I know it's unique times there, man. And thanks for sharing some of those stories. And I think a lot of people learned a lot today. And I think a lot of young broadcasters as well, not just fans, but broadcasters. But thanks for everything you've done. You've worked hard, man. You're one of the best. And I'm so hopefully we'll hear your voice down the road doing another sporting event real soon.
Looking forward to that day, man. Looking forward to seeing you down the line in person, sharing a hug and sharing some stories and sharing a laugh again, man. That'll be a good day.
Same here, brother.
All right. Thanks to Adam Amin again for an in-depth interview, which was pretty awesome to hear his thoughts and what was going through his mind during that South Florida UCF game deal. By the way, we have actually more. If you want to hear more about Adam Amin, especially those of you that are my softball audience, on In the Circle SB, we have an interview with Adam Amin where he goes into detail about softball broadcast and his partner Amanda Scarborough. You can follow that on the same platforms you listen to this podcast, and of course on In the Circle SB for all the details there on fastpitchnews.com. But Jeffrey, for this interview, the thing that struck it was amazing to me, just kind of his mind going through each situation in that fourth quarter, talking about dealing with Scott Frost, Jeff, during that week and going into the game and how he thought Scott handled it very well with them and the whole unique circumstances about his future. I thought it was some great in-depth perspective that we just don't, you're not going to get anywhere else, but kind of give you an inside idea of what broadcasters are thinking about in the booth when a game like this is developing.
I always thought that it's what people don't understand about when you're in the booth, and I've done it for baseball and for a couple of other sports, not on the level that Adam has, neither of us have, but one thing that we realize when preparing for these games is, we are, what you see is literally the tip of the iceberg. All that all the information that we have, and obviously we have to, the game itself takes up the 95% of what we're actually talking about, as it should, obviously. But that preparation provides the context for what we're doing, and those stories that it's a shame that in the course of a game, especially in a game like this one where there's so much action going on, you don't have the opportunity to talk all that much about some of the things that you see and you hear behind the scenes. And of course you see and you hear things behind the scenes that are not for public consumption in the course of the game. And I think that's part of what's so fascinating about it. And to hear him talk about that, I hope that we as UCF fans and UCF fans, I will say, they are hard on announcers, and I know this from my own experience too. Like they're a tough crowd to please. But I hope that fans gain an appreciation for not just Adam and the work that he does, but what all the announcers do in preparation for UCF and trying to put UCF in a national context. Of course, you're not going to get everything that you want to hear, but that's the primary issue that everyone's talking about is what is UCF in the national context, and he was able to put it together in that game.
No, he did, and it was a fantastic broadcast. And I think you remember this, and I know you guys touched on it on the rewatch that you'll talk about in a little bit. But I remember watching the game when you're at home watching the broadcast, whereas me and Murph were in the booth. So we obviously, yes, we're following it on the computer to some extent on the social media, but And we talked about it in the interview. The feedback on the broadcast was positive. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Richard Deitch, who covers the media industry, praised the broadcast. And fans, more importantly, praised it. Even to this day, they've praised that broadcast. And you know this. That's not easy to do in social media to get any approval that, positive. Usually it's the most mixed or negative. Oh, you don't like our team.
Why do you hate our team? Well, I used to joke that if I get messages from somebody saying from fans from both teams saying, "Why do you hate my team so much?" I've done my job.
Right. But this was a case, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember you were watching the game at home, so you probably were following it a lot closer. The feedback afterwards was incredible, and I remember that because when I got home from the game, all the feedback was still going, positive towards him. And I know, as you mentioned, that was a turning point in his career. He felt that was a game that showed a lot of maybe people that, were his bosses or whoever, that he can handle a big situation, a big moment, a big game like that one was. And so for him, that's, one of the most signature moments there. He felt a turning point, and that kind of started a run for him, as he talked about in the interview. He did the women's Final Four, and he did the LeBron and the NBA playoffs, and obviously he talked about in depth their very personal thing with his dad passing, in March of 2018. But that football game is a signature moment for him, because I think it put him, don't you think, in a different galaxy? I mean, a lot of us that follow this closely knew he was great, but I think that put him in a different galaxy, a different level with a lot of people, that now it's like, oh, Adam Amin's doing this game. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's an ultimate praise to him. But that's what I remember. Do you agree with that? Because you were following that closely. I don't remember a UCF game, and you mentioned it. I mean, the positive feedback from them and USF and just football fans in general for that game was pretty incredible and well-deserved.
It's one of those magic moments in sports where the event outstripped the hype and what we actually saw. Because there was a lot of hype around here coming into that game, but it so exceeded the hype. And I will say that now, Adam, if you're listening, I apologize for this because it's I hate to put this kind of put this out there, but it's true. It's the elephant in the room. So ESPN is looking for possibly a new Monday Night Football play-by-play guy, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Adam's name has been dropped in connection with quite possibly being that guy. And to tell you the truth, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but Eric, but perhaps his name doesn't start getting dropped into that conversation of big game announcers with big game experience without that game. His name doesn't get put in connection with MNF if that's not the case. And that's still in the broadcasting industry the holy grail. I mean, that's one of the, that's
one of them,
yeah. So, so we shall remain Adam Amin stands from here until the cows come home. And if you don't like it, too bad. Go listen to somebody else. But we're really thankful. I'm sad I couldn't get in on the conversation with him. I know that he's, even with sports on hiatus, he's still super busy trying to get
he's doing a bunch of other interview stuff.
Yeah, and
it was
for him to
interesting.
take this much time for us, I'm really appreciative. I hope we can have him on again, and I can listen in on it because it's what a joy to talk to.
No question, I agree. Hopefully we can get him back down the road. But he's done other interviews, and I don't think he didn't mention it in this interview, but that USF game, he feels it's right there. The two best probably his two top football games he's called. He's called the Auburn-Alabama game on the radio in 2013. Remember the kick six?
Yep.
That
he was
one,
the radio call for that one. That's right, yeah.
And then I think this one with the Mike Hughes one are probably his top two football games he's called in his career to this point.
Yeah. And unfortunately, nobody hears the national radio call of that kick six game. They only hear the Auburn call. Or the TV call with Vern Lundquist on CBS, and that's unfortunate. But everyone saw this.
Yeah, the Auburn-Alabama game, he did it on the radio side for a national radio at that time. But it's funny though. Even if you listen in the interview here, he's so like he still critiques himself very harshly, right? Like he's talking about the Otis Anderson thing and how he regrets saying that may have clinched it, like little things like that. And I'm like, that's not that big of a deal. But
we're all thinking the same thing, man.
Still kind of critiques it.
It's okay. We're all thinking the same thing.
Right. So that was a phenomenal game, and obviously a great call by him. And I think UCF fans still, obviously, for positive. I think UCF. Don't you agree? Every time he does either a UCF basketball game, he's done women's basketball, things like that. That's kind of the first thing that pops into, I think, a lot of UCF fans' mind is that 2017 South Florida game because of his calls of that game and that tremendous broadcast of that tremendous game.
Oh, Adam's here. Should be a good one tonight. That's right. So, real quick, if you want to watch our rewatch of the 2017 War on I-4, I have a link in the description of this podcast to that UCF Rewind video. It's myself, Brian Murphy, Andrew Glukov, Anthony Lenahan, and Jeremy Brenner talking about that game in depth. If you want to check it out, it's on our YouTube channel, and it's also and a link to that story is in the description on this podcast. Also, NFL draft and undrafted free agency news. Follow us for it. Black and Gold Banneret. We're also looking ahead to the 2021 draft this week. Which UCF players might have a shot, and what do they have to do in this upcoming year in order to have a shot at the 2021 draft? Yes, we're already looking forward to that. It's the draft. Everyone's always way too soon on the draft. So lots of stuff coming up. Even though there's no live sports going on, we will definitely get the opportunity to whet your appetite as well here, Eric Lopez.
Yeah, and we got some upcoming UCF Rewind episodes down the road. We're going to have a UCF Memphis game from 2017, the American Conference Championship game, working on the guest for that.
I was going to say, make sure you stay in live for that. We may have a very special guest.
That's right. We're going to do the Peach Bowl, which you, me, and Murph will be talking about that game from different perspectives because you were in the stands for that game at the Peach Bowl. Murph was in the press box. I was watching back at home, so we'll get the Peach Bowl. And also coming up, working on a project, the 2015 5-year anniversary of the UCF softball season. 5-year anniversary. We're going to have both Shelby Turnier and Mackenzie Audis on the podcast at the same time to reflect on the 5-year anniversary. That'll come out on the day of the anniversary, May 9th. Look for that on May 9th. That's the anniversary of the Tulsa win for the championship. You were at that game.
I was at that game. In fact, I'm very happy to say that was my son Connor's very first UCF sporting event.
You and I will have to share some stories about that on that episode leading into Mackenzie and Shelby's interview there. That'll be fun. And then we're also working on the 2005, a team you know very well, the 2005 UCF Softball Championship 15-year anniversary, working on the guests for that. So we got some rewind episodes, football, some softball, then other sports as time goes on.
All right, so it'll be fun. So stick around with us here at Black and Gold Banneret as we continue to roll through here. Don't socially distance from us online because we got a lot of stuff coming for you. For Eric Lopez, by the way, also special. One last thing I want to do. Special thanks again to Adam Amin. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam, A-D-A-M, Amin, A-M-I-N. No underscores, none of that. It's just A-D-A-M-M-A-M-I-N on Twitter. He's very active on Twitter, sometimes to a fault, as he will admit. But make sure you follow him. Special thanks to Adam, and special thanks to you, Eric Lopez. For Eric, I'm Jeff saying thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, UCF Rewind Edition.